If you think of the internet back in the 90s, right? Where are we with AI? If AI was equal to the internet, are we in the 90s of AI? Are we in the aughts of AI? Where are we with AI?
Welcome in, everybody. You're listening to Wrestling Payments, a podcast where we help payment professionals contend with the challenges of modernizing their payments operations and identifying ways to build for the future. If you're interested in payments innovation and modernization, you're in the right place. Now, let's get into it.
Hey, welcome to Wrestling Payments. I'm your host, Joe Casali. Today, I'm going to be headed back to the gym, right? And what does that mean? It means I just attended the MIT Fintech Conference, and there were groups of speakers. The audience, you got to know where you're coming from, right? When you're talking about fintech. So the audience was primarily geared towards students. And as we were looking at students, we're looking at students at MIT, probably participating in startups. There was a startup competition as part of this event. I am not a student at MIT. There were other folks there learning, kind of trying to get the wisdom, what's happening now in fintech and really with startups. So first of all, it's a great event. I highly recommend it if you're near or close to Boston. Every year, they have a fintech conference around February. I highly recommend you attend. I did meet a credit union member there, and I didn't actually meet, I overheard behind me a guy who traveled all the way from New York City to just listen to what was happening at this event. And as an overview, we're just going to cover a couple of things, but as an overview, we had a keynote speaker I've decided to follow the Chatham House rules on this event. So I'm not really going to be referencing names. I'm going to be referencing ideas. So we had a speaker from a local fintech, successful fintech in the payment space. We had a panel on CBDC, stablecoin, and crypto, and that included a bank's perspective and an exchange perspective. A really interesting session on AI, right? So AI is one of the topics we were going to cover this year, and I have some insights on that you're going to find really interesting. It was actually shocking for me. Beyond that, there was one session on faster payments, U.S. real-time payments. I will talk a bit about that. I'm trying to keep this to a reasonable length. So I'll just talk a little bit about that. But let's get started with the keynote. Keynote was a very successful entrepreneur. And I say very successful. He was in a high position at a local fintech, and he had made travels throughout his life between school and fintech, and more school and fintech, and finally he was a graduate of the MIT program, and he was a local fintech leader. He had lots of little nuggets of insight. And I'm looking down at my notes, so please excuse me if you're on the video. One of the things he explained that I found really interesting was he referenced two types of fintech. One fintech is in software, creating software for financial institutions to use to add value to a payment. The second part he talked about as hard. I didn't say hardware, I say hard. And those are fintechs that are actually processing transactions. And he separated them in that way. In the area of what's on the horizon, certainly, he said, more scrutiny and regulation. And that was interesting because I got the feeling, and I think you may get the feeling if you look around your vendors, the day of talking to a fintech who has no idea about uh, regulation around banking, those days are probably gone. They know something about it now. They're educating themselves around fintech regulations and the scrutiny that financial institutions are under. Talked about the market and the market conditions and the forces around that, and the need to be disciplined. Even the most successful, this was another tidbit, even the most successful fintech is only getting a fraction of the market. So the idea that all the markets are gone and that you shouldn't explore a new venture, all the fintechs only have a fraction of the market. So there should be plenty of TAM, totally addressable market, or real estate out there for a venture. Talked about AI being present. We're going to talk about AI later on, so I'm going to skip that. And one of the things about this fintech program conference, it really took a global approach. So um, half the time they were talking about global initiatives. And I will say I'm not covering here. I'm not going to cover they have a pitch contest, and the winner gets $10,000. Not going to talk about the pitch contest at all, or the participants. They, from my recollection, most of them were about money remittance, money serving markets of Africa, money serving markets of Europe, um, exchange rates, making it easier to transfer money between foreign countries. There were multiple pictures that's what they were talking about. That's what they were building. And all but one of them, and again, we're not mentioning any names, one of them I don't think had the idea of what is really involved in the regulatory part of money movement. And I think that I doubt they won. I didn't stay around long enough to hear them win. But moving on, there was a question and answer period right after the keynote spoke, and it was good. I think the thing I brought out of that, the biggest part that came out of that, was the team. He focused on his team. He said he had a great team, and you need one of two things to be an entrepreneur in the fintech world. One is a great idea. One is a great team. You need either one of those to be successful. And if the idea is strong enough, his reasoning, it can survive an okay team. And if your team is great, they can work on the idea. You need one of them. That was the point of that. And he talked about skills. We're all about skills here as well. What skills was he looking at? He referenced the regulatory scrutiny again. He said, make compliance a skill. It's not the first time we've heard that argument, but it's a recurring theme. So if you haven't made regulatory compliance a skill yet, maybe you put it on your wish list. Talked about cybersecurity. I think that is direct result of the amount of fraud we're seeing out in the payments world. Um, and he talked about partnerships. And for me, it was an interesting take on partnerships, because we talk about partnerships a lot in fintech and forming partnerships and what's that all about. What he really pointed out was, take, and now for my bankers, probably not going to be the best advice, but maybe you can reverse engineer it and make it your best advice. He talked about the fintechs coming in and making the contract their contract. He said when they started out and they needed partnerships with the provider, they would go and they'd get the boilerplate copy of the provider's contract, and they would work with that. He says as they evolved and as they got partnerships that worked for both parties, making it a win-win-win, he he started determining the contract points and providing the contract so it would be good for them, the fintech, to present to the banking partner. I thought I haven't heard that before. That was an interesting take. Just talked about beneficial points. I guess let me talk about the last point. He talked about mentorship. He said, who are your trusted advisors? So when you're thinking about your idea not maybe being good, or your team not being good, who can you go to find out more. And he said you can look to your mentors. And he talked about mentors as being real people that you've talked to and worked with and know. He's also talked about reading and resources and people you can listen to and use their content, their information as um, a resource, as a mentor. I never thought of Simon Sinek as being my mentor, but clearly he could be. All right, let's go next to a really quick session on CBDC, stablecoin, and crypto. Um, I will say the skills that we're learning for the membership at NEACH at these events, we're well positioned. None of these conversations were new ideas or foreign to us. We understood, for example, the stablecoin, CBDC, and crypto came down to the classic battle. You had a banker on the panel. You had a exchange person who ran an exchange on the panel. The person in banking talked about the existing channels and rails even faster. And Project Hamilton came up, the idea that a CBDC could be used for processing the digital dollar through a Project Hamilton experiment. Not that that exists today. There is no real dollar being exchanged via Project Hamilton. It was a proof of concept. There is no CBDC in the US. It was a proof of concept. Uh, the Bitcoin or the exchange guy was like, yeah, we already got that. We can do that today. So I found it very dismissive of how do you make it work together or how do you make it work in the current environment? It was very clear that the legal groundwork has not been set yet as far as cryptocurrencies go. Lots about crypto assets. They touched on stablecoins for a bit and how a stablecoin could be used, but lots more networking and discussions need to occur. My lunch conversation consisted of an advocate for a digital dollar who didn't understand the privacy concerns that folks would have and do have when you say we could track a dollar where it's spent all along its life cycle. And when I mentioned the fact that you have a whole contingent of the population that says, I don't want my money tracked, I think that's an invasion of my privacy, didn't really have a good response. So it's really the technology folks versus I'll say regulatory and traditional financing folks that still are in conflict on how to solve that problem. Progress is being made, but it's pretty slow. Now, the next session was on AI and finance, financial services. Cutting edge stuff. These folks were cutting edge, and I'm going to go right to the point on this one. This one was fascinating. And again, the speakers, who shall remain nameless, it's not a super secret. You can go look them up. It was the 2024 MIT Fintech Conference. I'm just not going to quote them, but one of the speakers towards the end of his session talked about, this was mind blowing for me, talked about AI as being the operating system. Dramatic pause. Talk about wrestling with a concept. What if AI became the underlying operating system on a platform you were working on, embedded, so it could make informed decisions about what you're trying to accomplish, how you're going about it, how did the standards go? Now, certainly, there is so much being done today with AI, and there are lots of precautions or cautious approaches to AI because, like the old days of computing, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have a well-informed model, you're going to get a bad solution. So talking about data, talking about how to use big data, and one of the things that always sticks in the back of my mind is big data is really, really big. And I wonder if some of our membership have enough data to be qualified or considered, not qualified, considered big data. Is the data big enough to make decisions? Fascinating. They teach a class on AI at MIT, and a quarter of the references for this semester, and this is February 2024, a quarter of the references for or the reading for this semester has a date of 2024. That's how fast AI is changing. And they talked a lot about generative AI, the idea that a chatbot can help answer most of the questions on a topic for a customer. That was a big deal. The idea, and it really only got mentioned, but I certainly at NEACH, we have an interest in how fraud detection will take place with AI, so I didn't see a lot of that. What else do we have here that's interesting? Yeah, 25% of the reading was in 2024. The velocity of AI is changing, is dramatic. There are platforms that vendors are using out there. So you don't necessarily have to create a new AI platform. One of the participants, the speakers, was using a Google product as their platform for AI development. But if you've used computers before and you wonder how they do things, imagine now you not only have storage and the processing brain that really is processing zeros and ones, you now have part of that CPU or part of that computer that is AI. And what could that mean? And I did have more than one thought of um, uh, the Terminator come to mind during this conversation. What happens when you let AI run things? Very scary, very scary. And I don't have notes on this, but I will mention it as a really maybe an inflection point. And they did talk about, I think it was right around this AI discussion. If you think of the internet back in the 90s, right? Uh, where are we with AI? Are we in AI? If AI was equal to the internet, are we in the 90s of AI? Are we in the aughts of AI? Where are we with AI? And lots of people had different thoughts on this. Now, the next discussion was a little sad for me. We've been involved with U.S. real-time payments for a while, and we've been cheerleaders. The industry wanted it. The industry developed it. The Fed developed it. So we have two big platforms today, and FedNow, which has passed 500 enrolled institutions, and RTP that certainly has, it's not apples and oranges. They have probably 65% plus of all the accounts in the US that could receive an RTP transaction. It's a different model, it's because the big banks have so many accounts. But it really now came to the discussion about, well, we really need the use case. So all the excitement around developing a real-time system has come down to, all right, it's a thing. What do we use it for? And it was really, I wouldn't say controversial, but show me. It was a show me. Show me how real-time payments helps. Show me how the use case for real-time payments makes a difference, changes the landscape. Show me. That I found that to be really interesting. And it was certainly a mix of academics and practitioners. And, you know, one of the things I say when I train or when I answer a question is, where are you standing? What viewpoint are you looking from on a topic? So with this group, we were looking from the academic viewpoint. And I say that because we weren't looking from a banking or a credit union practitioner viewpoint. So things that made payments, instant payments successful around the world are not here. And one of those things was mandates, right? Government mandates. So the audience isn't shy about asking, well, why couldn't we mandate this? And, if you've been a banker for any type amount of time, um, government mandates are things we're not. Government mandates aren't, people, the United States is free will, New Hampshire, our neighbor to the north is don't tread on. So having or suggesting that we have a government mandate on the payment systems is just, it's not a game. What is it? It's not a game starter for us. We're not interested in a government mandate for FedNow, a government mandate for RTP. They want to be users, love it. Please come along, but not mandating that, for example, all checks be eliminated by 2030 and FedNow become the rail of choice by 2030. Not looking for that. We are very interested in the market, deciding and planning and directing payment growth. So you have to remember what audience you're with when you're hearing some of that conversation. But that was my attendance at the MIT Fintech Conference. Highly recommend it. They are one of the groups in Boston that provide insight into the up and coming fintechs. Mass Challenge is another that is part of the up and coming fintech community. The other thing is, I guess a PS I have on this. These fintechs are starting from green fields. So everything is fresh to them. Everything is new to them. If you have a member, for instance, an association that may have a member that's 150 years old, it's not as easy to say, oh, we're just going to put a new system in. It has to work with the old system. Your systems have to communicate. What does that mean? Do you have to sunset an existing system? It's not as easy as we're going to create a system and the system's going to transfer money between Africa and Canada and it'll be easy and fast. And look, it's so easy. It's when you're trying to integrate into an existing landscape, it's not easy. We know that. Just another observation of this group: young, exciting, smart, entrepreneurial. They're Sloan. They are MIT students. They knew what they were talking about during that pitch contest. The audience, not the audience, the judges were asking hard questions, and they were doing really well. But that's all for this episode. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to share them on the platform you're listening on or LinkedIn. Happy to hear them. Thanks.
On behalf of NEACH, your trusted resource in payments, and our guests, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to hear more about payments innovation and modernization, you can find the Wrestling Payments Podcast on the podcast page of NEACH.org or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Just search for Wrestling Payments in your podcast app. Thanks for listening.